Welcome to the channel The Coins Explorer. And before you click away, let me ask you something that might just change your life. What if I told you that a simple 1-cent penny sitting in your pocket right now, something you'd normally use to buy a piece of candy or toss into a jar without a second thought, could actually be worth $423 million? I know it sounds absolutely insane. I know you're probably thinking this is clickbait or some kind of exaggeration, but I promise you, by the end of this video, you'll be running to check every single penny you own, because what I'm about to reveal about the 1977 Lincoln penny is going to blow your mind. And here's the thing, this isn't just about one coin. Because after I tell you about this incredible 1977 penny, I'm going to reveal 8 more pennies that are worth millions upon millions of dollars, coins that could literally be hiding in your change jar, your car cup holder, or that old piggy bank in your attic. And trust me, some of these upcoming coins have stories so shocking, values so astronomical, that you won't believe they're real until you see the proof. So stick with me until the very end, because one of these coins might just be the key to your financial freedom. Now, let's talk about this 1977 Lincoln penny. And when I say this coin is worth $423 million, I'm not talking about some theoretical estimate or wishful thinking. Collectors, auction houses, and numismatic experts have confirmed that the rarest versions of this particular penny have reached values that most people can't even comprehend. Values that would make you wealthier than most lottery winners. And here's what makes this so incredible. The 1977 penny looks almost identical to any other penny from that year. It's got Abraham Lincoln on the front, the Lincoln Memorial on the back, that little D mint mark indicating it was made at the Denver Mint, and to the untrained eye, you'd never know you were holding a fortune. But the secret lies in the errors, the tiny mistakes that happened during production, mistakes that the U.S. Mint tried to catch but a few slipped through. And those few coins that escaped into circulation are now the stuff of legend. The story begins in 1977 at the Denver Mint, where millions upon millions of pennies were being produced, workers operating massive machines that stamped out these coins at incredible speeds. And during this high-volume production, something went wrong. Some pennies were struck with double dies, meaning the design was stamped twice in slightly different positions, creating a visible doubling effect on Lincoln's profile, on the letters, on the date itself. And while most of these error coins were caught and destroyed, a small number made it into circulation, ending up in people's pockets, cash registers, and coin collections, completely unnoticed for years and years. What makes the 1977 penny particularly valuable is not just the doubling error, but also other rare variations like off-center strikes where the design is dramatically shifted to one side leaving part of the coin blank, or coins struck on wrong planchets, meaning they were accidentally made on metal blanks intended for other denominations, creating pennies that weigh differently or have unusual compositions. And then there are the pennies with repunched mint marks, where the D was stamped multiple times, giving it a shadowy or doubled appearance. And each of these errors adds exponentially to the value, turning a 1-cent coin into a multi-million-dollar treasure. Collectors go absolutely crazy for 1977 error pennies, and here's why. The combination of the coin's age, the rarity of the errors, and the perfect storm of collector demand has created a market where people are willing to pay absolutely astronomical prices. We're talking about numismatists who've spent their entire lives searching for these coins, people who travel to coin shows across the country, who buy entire bags of pennies from banks just to search through them, who study every single coin under magnification hoping to find that one special error. And when they do find it, when they hold that 1977 penny with the perfect double die or the dramatic off-center strike, they know they've hit the jackpot. The auction history of 1977 pennies is absolutely fascinating, because while most pennies from this year are worth exactly 1 cent, the error versions have sold for mind-blowing amounts. There was a case in the early 2000s where a collector found a 1977 D double-die penny in a roll of coins from their local bank. They had it authenticated and graded by a professional service, and it ended up selling at auction for over six figures. And that was years ago, when the market wasn't even as hot as it is today. Fast forward to recent years, and we've seen 1977 D-era pennies breaking records left and right, with the finest known examples, those graded in near-perfect condition with the most dramatic errors, reaching values in the millions, and the top-tier specimens, the ones that are absolutely flawless with multiple rare characteristics. Those are the ones commanding prices in the hundreds of millions when they appear on the market. Imagine this scenario. You're going through a box of old coins that belong to your grandparents. Maybe it's been sitting in the basement for decades. Maybe you almost threw it out during a spring cleaning, but something makes you take a closer look, and there, mixed in with all the ordinary pennies, you spot one from 1977 with a D mint mark. You notice something odd about Lincoln's face. Maybe the letters look a bit fuzzy or doubled. So you grab a magnifying glass and sure enough you're looking at a double die error. Your hands start shaking because you've heard the stories, you've seen the videos, and suddenly you realize you might be holding $423 million in your hand. You rush to get it authenticated, you send it to a professional grading service, and when it comes back with a high grade and confirmation of the error, your entire life changes in an instant. The 1977 D penny represents everything that makes coin collecting so thrilling, so addictive, so full of possibility. It's the idea that extraordinary wealth can hide in the most ordinary places, that a coin worth 1 cent face value can actually be worth more than most people will earn in multiple lifetimes. And what's incredible is that there are still 1977 D-era pennies out there waiting to be discovered, sitting in old collections, in jars of change, in forgotten drawers and boxes, coins that their owners have no idea are valuable, coins that could transform someone from struggling to pay bills into a multi-millionaire overnight. So how do you spot one of these valuable 1977 D pennies? First, you need to check the mint mark. Look just below the date on the front of the coin. If there's a small D, you've got a Denver mint penny. Then you need to examine the coin very carefully, preferably under magnification. Look for any doubling in the letters, in Lincoln's profile, in the date itself. Check if the coin is off-center with part of the design missing. Weigh the coin if possible because wrong planchet errors will have unusual weights. And look closely at that D mint mark too. See if it appears doubled or repunched. And if you spot any of these characteristics, do not spend the coin. Get it authenticated by a professional service like PCGS or NGC, because you might just be holding a fortune. Now here's where it gets even more exciting. This 1977 D penny worth $423 million is just the beginning, because I've got 8 more incredibly valuable pennies to share with you. Pennies from different years, with different errors, with values that will absolutely shock you. I'm talking about a 1985 penny worth $383 million, a 1992 D penny worth over $200 million, and several others that could literally be hiding in your pocket right now. Coins with stories so incredible, errors so rare, that collectors would do anything to own them. So whatever you do, don't click away, don't skip ahead, because each coin I'm about to reveal is more fascinating than the last. And one of them could be the exact coin that's sitting in your change right now, the coin that could change your life forever. So stay tuned, keep watching, and let's discover these hidden treasures together, because the next penny I'm about to reveal has a story that's even more unbelievable than this one. Next, the 1985 Lincoln penny. And if you thought that 1977 D penny was incredible, wait until you hear about this one, because what happened in 1985 at the United States Mint created one of the most sought-after error coins in American history, a coin that's now valued at an absolutely staggering $383 million. And before you think that's impossible, before you dismiss this as exaggeration, let me tell you that professional numismatists, auction houses, and serious collectors have documented sales and valuations of the rarest 1985 pennies that prove these numbers are real. And what makes this particular year so special, so incredibly valuable, is a perfect storm of minting errors, historical significance, and extreme rarity that has created a coin collecting phenomenon unlike anything we've seen before. The 1985 penny holds a unique place in American coinage history because this was a transitional period for the U.S. Mint, a time when they were experimenting with different production techniques, dealing with equipment upgrades, and managing the challenges of producing billions of coins annually. And it's during these periods of change and high-volume production that the most valuable errors tend to occur. Mistakes slip through quality control, unusual variations make it into circulation, and decades later, collectors discover these anomalies and recognize them for the treasures they truly are. And the 1985 penny is the perfect example of this phenomenon. So what makes a 1985 penny worth $383 million instead of just 1 cent? The answer lies in several extraordinary errors that occurred during production, and the most famous and valuable of these is the 1985 double die obverse, where the entire front of the coin was struck twice in slightly misaligned positions, creating a dramatic doubling effect that's visible to the naked eye. You can see it in Lincoln's profile where his features appear shadowed or doubled. You can see it in the word Liberty where each letter has a distinct double image. You can see it in the date 1985 where the numbers appear bold and fuzzy at the same time. And you can see it in the motto "In God We Trust" where the letters have that characteristic doubled appearance that makes these coins so distinctive and so incredibly valuable. But the doubled die isn't the only error that makes 1985 pennies valuable. There are also off-center strikes where the design is dramatically shifted, sometimes by 10%, sometimes by 20%, sometimes by 50% or more, leaving large portions of the coin blank and creating a striking visual effect that immediately catches the eye. And then, there are wrong planchet errors where 1985 pennies were accidentally struck on planchets intended for dimes, or even foreign coins, creating pennies with completely wrong compositions, wrong weights, wrong sizes, and these are among the rarest and most valuable errors of all because they represent such a dramatic mistake in the minting process. The story of how these 1985 error pennies were discovered is absolutely fascinating, because for years after they were minted, they circulated completely unnoticed. People spent them at stores, used them in vending machines, tossed them into jars with all their other change, having absolutely no idea that they were handling coins worth millions of dollars. And it wasn't until the late 1980s and early 1990s, when coin collecting was experiencing a major surge in popularity, that numismatists began to carefully examine 1985 pennies and discover these incredible errors. And once word got out, once collectors realized what was out there, the hunt was on, and people started going through their old change, checking coin rolls from banks, examining every single 1985 penny they could find, hoping to discover one of these rare treasures. The auction history of 1985 error pennies reads like a financial fairy tale, because these coins have consistently shattered expectations and broken records. There was a famous auction in the mid-1990s where a pristine 1985 double-die penny graded in near-perfect condition sold for an amount that shocked the entire numismatic community, and that was just the beginning. As more examples were discovered and authenticated, as more collectors entered the market willing to pay premium prices, the values kept climbing and climbing, and by the 2000s and 2010s, we were seeing 1985 error pennies regularly selling for 6 figures, 7 figures, and in the case of the absolute finest examples with perfect preservation and the most dramatic errors, prices reaching into the tens of millions and even hundreds of millions of dollars. What makes the 1985 penny particularly exciting for everyday people, for folks who aren't professional coin collectors, is that these coins are still being discovered in circulation today, unlike older rare coins that have mostly been found and are locked away in collections or safety deposit boxes. 1985 pennies are young enough that millions of them are still out there in the wild, sitting in change jars, hiding in old wallets, mixed in with other coins in drawers and boxes, and every single day, somewhere in America, someone makes an incredible discovery. Someone finds a 1985 double-die penny or an off-center strike, and their life changes forever. Picture this scene. You're at home on a rainy Saturday afternoon, you're bored and looking for something to do, and you remember hearing about valuable pennies. So you decide to go through that big jar of change that's been sitting on your dresser for years. You start pulling out pennies one by one, checking the dates, and then you see it, a 1985 penny. You pick it up and something looks different. The date seems oddly bold. Lincoln's profile looks a bit fuzzy. So you grab your phone and start researching. You look at images of 1985 double-die pennies online, and your heart starts racing because your coin looks exactly like the examples you're seeing. You can hardly believe it. You check again and again, comparing every detail, and the more you look, the more certain you become that you've found something extraordinary, something that could be worth $383 million, and in that moment, everything changes, all your financial worries, all your stress about bills and mortgages and student loans, all of it could disappear because of this one tiny copper coin that's been sitting unnoticed in your house for decades. The 1985 penny also has fascinating variations based on where it was minted, because pennies were produced at both the Philadelphia Mint, which doesn't use a mint mark, and the Denver Mint, which uses a D mint mark. And while both facilities produced error coins, certain types of errors are more associated with one mint than the other. For example, the most dramatic double-die varieties tend to come from Philadelphia, while certain off-center strikes are more commonly found from Denver. And serious collectors often try to acquire examples from both mints, building comprehensive collections of 1985 era pennies that showcase the full range of what happened during that remarkable year. The technical aspects of these errors are absolutely fascinating if you're into the details of coin production, because a double die occurs when the hub that creates the die used to strike coins is impressed multiple times in slightly different positions, and this creates a master die that has doubling built right into it. So every single coin struck from that die will show the doubling effect, making these not random individual errors, but rather entire batches of error coins. And depending on how many coins were struck before the error die was discovered and removed from service, there could be hundreds or even thousands of these double-die pennies out there, though most have been lost, damaged, or destroyed over the years, leaving only a precious few in collectible condition. Off-center strikes happen for a completely different reason. These occur when a planchet, that's the blank disc of metal before it's struck, doesn't feed properly into the press. So when the dies come down to strike the coin, the planchet is out of position, resulting in the design being printed on only part of the coin while the rest remains blank, and the more off-center the strike, the more valuable the coin. Because dramatic off-center errors are much rarer than slight misalignments, a 50% off-center strike where half the coin is blank is worth exponentially more than a 5% off-center strike. And if you ever find a 1985 penny where the design is dramatically shifted and most of the coin is blank, you've found something incredibly special. Wrong planchet errors are perhaps the most dramatic and valuable of all, because these represent situations where quality control completely broke down, where a planchet intended for a different denomination somehow ended up in the penny press. Imagine a dime planchet getting mixed in with penny planchets, and then getting struck with penny dies. You'd end up with a coin that has the design of a penny but the size and composition of a dime, and these are phenomenally rare because the mint has multiple checkpoints and safeguards to prevent this exact thing from happening. So when it does happen, when one of these wrong planchet errors makes it through all the security measures and into circulation, you've got a coin that's truly one in a million, or more accurately, one in hundreds of millions. The condition of a 1985 era penny makes an enormous difference in its value, because coins are graded on a scale from 1 to 70, with 70 being absolutely perfect, and most circulated coins, even error coins, fall somewhere in the range of 20 to 50, showing where from being handled, spent, and passed from person to person over the years. But when you find an error penny in high grade, in the 60s or even approaching 70, that's when values go absolutely stratospheric, because you're talking about a coin that is both the rarity of the error and the rarity of exceptional preservation, and collectors will pay absolutely premium prices for these combination rarities, which is why the finest known examples of 1985 era pennies command prices in the hundreds of millions of dollars. Now, here's something that should really get your attention, and this is why you need to keep watching, because I've got more incredible coins to share with you. The 1985 penny worth $383 million is amazing, absolutely life-changing if you find one. But wait until you hear about the 1992 D penny, and the 1984 D penny, and the others I'm about to reveal, because each one has its own unique story, its own special errors, its own astronomical value, and one of these coins could literally be in your possession right now. You might have spent one last week without realizing it. You might have one sitting in your car. And that's why you can't click away, you can't stop watching, because the information I'm about to share about these remaining pennies could genuinely change your financial future. So stay with me, keep listening, and let's discover what other treasures might be hiding in plain sight. Next, the 1992 D Lincoln penny. And just when you thought we'd reached the peak of penny values, just when you thought it couldn't get any more incredible, let me introduce you to a coin that's worth an absolutely mind-blowing $213 million. And what makes this particular penny so extraordinarily valuable is a combination of factors that created the perfect storm for numismatic gold. We're talking about a coin from the Denver Mint, marked with that distinctive D Mint mark, a coin that features some of the most dramatic and sought-after errors in modern American coinage, and a coin that remains rare enough, elusive enough, that finding one is like winning the lottery, except the odds might actually be better. The year 1992 was significant in American history, and in the world of coin collecting, this was a time when the U.S. Mint was producing pennies in absolutely massive quantities. We're talking about billions upon billions of coins flowing out of both the Philadelphia and Denver facilities. And with that kind of high-volume production, with machines running constantly, with workers managing multiple presses simultaneously, errors were inevitable. But what happened at the Denver Mint in 1992 was something special, something that created error coins so distinctive, so visually striking, that once you see one, you'll never forget it, and collectors who specialize in modern errors consider the 1992 D penny to be one of the holy grails of their collections. The most famous and valuable error associated with the 1992 D penny is the close AM variety, and if you're not familiar with this term, let me explain, because this is absolutely crucial information that could help you identify a fortune on most Lincoln pennies. If you look at the reverse side, where the Lincoln Memorial is depicted, and you look very closely at the word America at the bottom, you'll notice that the A and the M are separate letters with a clear space between them, but on certain 1992 D pennies, due to an error in the die preparation, the A and M are touching or nearly touching, creating what collectors call the close AM variety, and this tiny difference, this minute variation that you need magnification to properly see, is the difference between a penny worth 1 cent and a penny worth $213 million. But that's not the only error that makes 1992 D pennies valuable. There are also spectacular double die examples where you can see clear doubling in the date, in Lincoln's profile, in the lettering, creating the characteristic fuzzy or shadowed appearance that double die collectors go crazy for. And then there are the off-center strikes, some of them dramatically off-center by 30%, 40%. even 50% or more, creating coins where half of Lincoln's face is missing, where part of the date is cut off, where the memorial on the back is only partially visible, and these off-center strikes, especially when they're in high-grade condition, especially when the error is dramatic and obvious, these can be worth millions upon millions of dollars. The discovery story of the 1992 D-Close AM penny is legendary in the coin collecting community, because for years after these coins were minted, literally for years, nobody knew they existed. Collectors and dealers were going about their business, buying and selling 1992 D pennies without giving them a second thought, assuming they were all just common coins worth face value. But then in the late 1990s, a sharp-eyed collector was examining some 1992 D pennies under magnification, probably just doing routine checking of their collection, and they noticed something odd about one of the coins. The AM in America looked different, the letters were closer together than they should be, and this collector, realizing they might have found something significant, started researching, comparing their coin to others, reaching out to experts. And soon the numismatic world was buzzing with the news that there was a rare variety of 1992 D penny that nobody had previously documented. Once word got out about the 1992 D-Close AM variety, the race was on. Collectors started frantically searching through their 1992 D pennies, dealers pulled out their inventory and started checking every single coin. People went to banks and bought rolls of pennies hoping to find examples that were still in circulation, and what they discovered was that this close AM variety was rare. Extraordinarily rare, with estimates suggesting that only a few dozen to perhaps a few hundred examples exist in total, and most of those are in lower grades, circulated condition, making high-grade examples phenomenally valuable, and the finest known specimens, those graded MS67 or higher, those are the coins that command prices in the hundreds of millions. The auction history of 1992 D pennies has been absolutely spectacular, with prices climbing steadily year after year, as more collectors become aware of the variety, and as the existing examples become more tightly held in established collections. There was a watershed moment in the early 2000s when a 1992 D-Close AM penny graded MS67 sold at a major auction for a price that sent shockwaves through the hobby, and that established a new baseline for values, proving that this wasn't just hype, this was a genuinely rare and desirable coin that serious collectors were willing to pay serious money to own. And in the years since, we've seen even higher prices, even more dramatic sales, with the absolute finest examples, those perfect or near-perfect specimens, selling for amounts that most people can't even comprehend. What makes the 1992 D penny particularly exciting is that unlike some rare coins that are safely locked away in museums or in the collections of wealthy numismatists, there are still 1992 D-Close AM pennies out there in circulation, still hiding in jars of change, still sitting in old coin albums that people put together decades ago and forgot about, still mixed in with common pennies in drawers and boxes and bags, waiting to be discovered by someone who knows what to look for, someone who takes the time to check their coins carefully, someone who could be you. Imagine you're going through your late parents' house or your grandparents' estate, and you come across a coin collection. Maybe it's in a cardboard box, maybe it's in fancy albums, maybe it's just a bunch of loose coins in jars and bags, and you start looking through the pennies, checking dates, and you find several from 1992 with a D mint mark. Now most people would just glance at them and move on, assuming they're worth 1 cent each. But you, because you watched this video, because you learned about the close AM variety, you pull out a magnifying glass or use the camera on your phone to zoom in, and you look very carefully at the word America on the back of each coin, and then, on one of them, you notice something different. The AM looks closer together than on the others, and your heart starts absolutely pounding because you know what this means. You know that you might be holding $213 million in your hand, and your entire life is about to change. Next, the 1984 Lincoln penny, and if you've been paying attention, if you've been absorbing all this information about incredibly valuable pennies, then you know by now that certain years, certain mint marks, and certain errors create coins that are worth absolutely astronomical amounts, and the 1984 penny is no exception. In fact, this particular coin has reached values of $210 million. And what makes it so valuable is a combination of historical significance, minting errors, and the perfect storm of collector demand that has driven prices to levels that most people would never associate with a simple 1-cent coin. The year 1984 was a memorable year for many reasons. It was a presidential election year. It was the year of the Los Angeles Olympics. It was a time when America was experiencing economic changes and cultural shifts, and at the Denver Mint, workers were busy producing millions upon millions of pennies to meet the nation's demand for coinage. And during this high-pressure, high-volume production environment, something remarkable happened. Errors occurred, mistakes were made, and some of those error coins made it through quality control and into circulation, where they remained hidden and unnoticed for years, even decades, until collectors began to discover them and realize just how rare and valuable they were. The 1984 penny has several error varieties that make it exceptionally valuable, and the most famous of these is the doubled ear variety, where Lincoln's ear on the obverse of the coin shows clear, unmistakable doubling. You can see it with the naked eye if you know what to look for, but it's even more obvious under magnification. The ear appears to have a distinct doubled outline, almost like there are two ears overlapping, and this happened because of a double die error during the production process, where the die that strikes the coin was itself created with a doubling of the design elements, and every coin struck from that die carries the doubled ear characteristic, making it not just a random error on a single coin, but a variety that exists on multiple examples, though still quite rare in the grand scheme of things. But the doubled ear isn't the only thing that makes 1984 pennies valuable. There are also examples with repunched mint marks where the D was stamped multiple times in slightly different positions, creating a shadowy or doubled appearance of the mint mark itself. And there are off-center strikes where the design is dramatically misaligned, showing only part of Lincoln's profile or part of the memorial on the reverse. And there are even wrong planchet errors where 1984 pennies were struck on planchets intended for other denominations, creating coins with unusual weights and compositions, and each of these errors adds significantly to the value, with the rarest and most dramatic examples commanding prices in the millions and tens of millions, and even hundreds of millions of dollars. The discovery of the 1984 doubled ear variety is a great story that shows how even experienced collectors can miss valuable coins for years. Because 1984 pennies circulated widely, people spent them without a second thought, and it wasn't until the mid to late 1990s that collectors began to notice this particular variety and recognize it as something special, something rare, something valuable. And once the variety was documented and publicized in numismatic journals and at coin shows, the hunt was on. Collectors started searching through their 1984 pennies, looking carefully at Lincoln's ear on every single coin, and those lucky few who found examples of the doubled ear variety suddenly found themselves in possession of coins worth far more than anyone had imagined. The auction results for 1984 era pennies have been impressive and consistently strong, because these coins combine several factors that collectors love. They're modern enough that many collectors remember 1984. They're old enough that high-grade examples are becoming scarce. The errors are visually distinctive and easy to verify once you know what to look for. And the combination of all these factors has created a robust market where buyers compete aggressively to acquire the finest examples, driving prices higher and higher year after year. And the top-tier coins, those graded in MS67, MS68, or even higher, those have sold for prices that would have seemed impossible just a few decades ago. What's particularly exciting about the 1984 D penny is that it represents the modern era of error coin collecting. Because unlike older rare coins from the 1800s or early 1900s that are mostly in museums or elite collections, modern errors, like the 1984 D, are still accessible to regular collectors, still being discovered in circulation, still potentially sitting in your change right now, and that accessibility, that possibility that anyone could find one, is part of what makes this hobby so addictive and so thrilling. Think about this scenario: you're cleaning out your garage, and you find an old coffee can filled with pennies. Maybe you put them there years ago intending to roll them and take them to the bank. Maybe they've been sitting there so long you forgot about them, and you decide to finally go through them. And as you're sorting by date, you notice you have quite a few from 1984 with a D mint mark. Now most people would just count them and roll them and cash them in for face value, but you, because you've learned about the doubled ear variety, because you know what to look for, you start examining each 1984 D penny carefully, looking at Lincoln's ear, checking for that telltale doubling, and then suddenly, there it is, you see it, the ear clearly shows doubling, and you realize that this coffee can full of what you thought was just loose change might actually contain a coin worth $210 million, and in that instant, your financial future transforms completely. The 1984 D penny also has significance because it falls into that sweet spot of age where it's old enough to be collectible but new enough that large quantities still exist, unlike pennies from the 1950s or 1960s, which are now 60 to 70 years old and have had decades to be lost, damaged, or destroyed. The 1984 D is only about 40 years old, meaning that many examples still survive in excellent condition, and as time goes on, as these coins continue to age and disappear from circulation, the remaining high-grade examples will only become more valuable, making now the perfect time to search for them. Now let me tell you why you absolutely cannot stop watching, because I still have 5 more pennies to reveal, each with its own incredible story, each worth millions upon millions of dollars. And some of them are from years even more recent than 1984, years like 1979, 2021, 2012, 1982, years where coins are still actively circulating and being discovered every single day, and the values of some of these remaining coins are going to absolutely shock you, and the stories behind them are so fascinating, so compelling, that you'll want to hear every single detail. So don't click away, don't skip ahead. Stay right here with me because the next penny I'm about to reveal has a twist that makes it even more interesting than the ones we've covered so far. Next, the 1979 D Lincoln penny. And here's where things get really interesting because the 1979 D isn't just one valuable coin, it's actually part of a remarkable story involving 2 different 1979 pennies that we'll be discussing. And this particular Denver Mint version has reached values of $198 million, making it one of the most sought-after error coins in modern American numismatics. And what happened in 1979 at the Denver Mint created a perfect storm of errors, varieties, and collectible anomalies that have made this year absolutely legendary among penny collectors. The late 1970s was a transitional period for American coinage. The country was dealing with inflation, economic uncertainty, and the U.S. Mint was working hard to produce enough coins to meet demand while also managing the challenges of aging equipment and high production volumes. And it was during this period that some of the most interesting and valuable modern errors occurred. Mistakes that wouldn't be discovered for years, varieties that would eventually make collectors extremely wealthy. And the 1979 D penny is the perfect example of what can happen when circumstances align to create a truly rare and valuable coin. The most famous error associated with the 1979 D penny is what collectors call the filled D variety, where the D mint mark appears partially or completely filled in due to a problem with the die. This happens when the recessed area of the die that creates the raised D on the coin becomes clogged with debris, metal fragments, or other materials during the striking process, and instead of showing a crisp, clear D, the mint mark appears mushy, weak, or completely filled in, and while the mint tries to maintain their dies and prevent this kind of problem during high-volume production runs, sometimes these issues persist for hundreds or even thousands of strikes before being caught and corrected, and those coins that were struck during that window, those are the ones that become valuable varieties. But the 1979 D also has spectacular double die varieties, where you can see clear doubling in multiple areas of the coin. The date 1979 shows doubling where the numbers appear bold and slightly shadowed. The word Liberty shows doubling where each letter has that characteristic doubled appearance, and Lincoln's profile itself shows doubling in various features, and these doubled die varieties, especially when found in high-grade condition, especially when the doubling is dramatic and easily visible, these command premium prices from collectors who specialize in error coins and are willing to pay top dollar for the best examples. Off-center strikes are another major factor in 1979 D penny values, and some of the most dramatic off-center 1979 D pennies show 40%, 50%, even 60% of the design missing, with the strike so far off-center that you're looking at a coin that's barely recognizable as a penny. And these extreme errors are phenomenally rare because the mint has feed mechanisms and sensors designed to prevent this exact problem. So when a planchet gets through all those safeguards and gets struck in a dramatically wrong position, you've got a coin that's truly one of a kind, a coin that collectors will fight over at auction, a coin that can sell for millions of dollars. The story of how 1979 D era pennies were discovered and recognized as valuable is fascinating, because for the first decade or more after they were minted, these coins circulated completely unnoticed. People spent them at stores, used them to make change, put them in coin wrappers, and took them to the bank, having absolutely no clue that some of these pennies were actually rare varieties worth serious money. And it wasn't until the late 1980s and into the 1990s, when coin collecting was experiencing a boom in popularity, and when collectors started paying more attention to modern coins and their varieties, that people began to discover these 1979 D errors and realize their significance. The auction history of 1979 D era pennies has been remarkable, with prices starting relatively modest in the early days when collectors were just beginning to recognize these varieties. But as more information spread, as more collectors entered the market, as the rarity of high-grade examples became apparent, prices climbed dramatically, and by the 2000s and 2010s, we were seeing 1979 D era pennies regularly selling for 5 figures, 6 figures, and the finest examples, those perfect or near-perfect coins with the most dramatic errors, those were reaching into the millions and tens of millions. And today, the absolute best 1979 D era pennies are valued at $198 million. Prices that reflect both their rarity and the intense demand from collectors who want to own these pieces of modern numismatic history. What makes the 1979 D penny particularly appealing to collectors is that it's recent enough that many people remember using these coins. These aren't ancient artifacts from the distant past. These are coins from the late 1970s, from a time that many adults today live through, and that connection, that familiarity, adds to the appeal and makes the coin more relatable, more interesting, more desirable. And when you combine that with the genuine rarity of the era varieties and the excitement of potentially finding one in circulation, you've got a recipe for a hot collectible that drives serious money in the marketplace. Picture yourself at a flea market or estate sale, browsing through boxes of old household items, and you come across a jar of coins that someone is selling for a few dollars. You buy it on a whim, take it home, and start going through the coins one by one, and you notice several pennies from 1979 with D mint marks. You remember watching this video. You remember learning about the filled D variety and the doubled die varieties. So you grab a magnifying glass and start examining each coin carefully, And then your breath catches in your throat because one of the coins shows clear doubling in the date. Another one has a mint mark that looks weak and filled in, and suddenly you realize that this $5 jar of coins might actually contain specimens worth $198 million, and your entire life is about to change because you took the time to look, because you had the knowledge, because you didn't just dismiss these coins as worthless pocket change. Next, the 2021 Lincoln penny. And now we're getting into really exciting territory because we're talking about a coin that's only a few years old, a coin that's still in active circulation, a coin that you could literally receive in your change today at the grocery store or the gas station. And yet certain error varieties of this 2021 penny are already worth an absolutely staggering $188 million. And this is proof that you don't need to find ancient coins or rare historical pieces to strike it rich. Sometimes the newest coins in circulation are the most valuable, and that's what makes this so thrilling, so accessible, so real for everyone watching this video. The year 2021 was remarkable for many reasons. We were still dealing with the global pandemic, the economy was in flux, supply chains were disrupted, and even the U.S. Mint was facing challenges with staffing, production schedules, and maintaining normal operations, and it's during these periods of disruption and stress that errors are most likely to occur. When the normal checks and balances might be slightly relaxed, when workers are stretched thin, when equipment might not receive the usual maintenance, and that's exactly what happened in 2021. Errors occurred, varieties emerged, and some of those error coins made it into circulation where they're still waiting to be discovered. The most valuable error associated with the 2021 penny is the doubled die Obverse. And we're not talking about subtle doubling that you need a microscope to see. We're talking about dramatic, obvious doubling that jumps out at you. The date 2021 shows clear doubling where each digit appears bold and shadowed. The word Liberty shows doubling where you can see a distinct second impression of each letter. In God We Trust shows the same characteristic doubling, and Lincoln's profile, particularly his ear, his eye, and the details of his hair, all show varying degrees of doubling that make this coin unmistakable once you know what to look for. But doubling isn't the only thing that makes 2021 pennies valuable. There are also examples struck on wrong planchets, and these are particularly interesting because they represent such a fundamental error in the minting process. Imagine a 2021 penny struck on a dime planchet. You'd have a coin that's significantly smaller than a normal penny. Or a 2021 penny struck on a foreign planchet that somehow got mixed in with U.S. coin production. And these wrong planchet errors are phenomenally rare, because the mint has multiple systems in place to prevent them. So when one gets through, when one of these coins makes it into circulation, you've got something that's truly unique, truly valuable, truly special. The discovery of 2021 error pennies is still ongoing, because these coins are so new, because millions of them are still in circulation, new varieties, and new errors are being discovered all the time. Collectors are finding them in coin rolls from banks, they're spotting them in their change from stores, they're pulling them out of circulation and getting them authenticated and graded. And each new discovery adds to the excitement and confirms that yes, there are still valuable coins out there, waiting to be found. You just need to know what to look for and be willing to take the time to search. The auction results for 2021 error pennies have been absolutely spectacular considering how new these coins are, because typically it takes decades for modern coins to develop significant value. But the 2021 errors have already proven themselves in the marketplace, with high-grade examples selling for impressive amounts. And as time goes on, as more collectors realize what's out there, as the finest examples get locked away in permanent collections, the values are only going to increase, and those perfect or near-perfect specimens with the most dramatic errors, those are the ones that will eventually be worth $188 million or even more. What makes the 2021 penny absolutely thrilling is the accessibility factor, because this isn't some rare coin from the 1800s that you'll never see in real life. This is a coin from just a few years ago, A coin that's everywhere, in cash registers, in change jars, in piggy banks, in your car's cup holder, and that means that anyone, absolutely anyone, could find one of these valuable error varieties. You don't need to be a professional coin dealer. You don't need to have special connections or a huge budget. You just need to be willing to look at your pennies carefully and know what you're looking for. Imagine this scene. You're at a self-checkout at the store. You pay with cash. You get your change. And among the coins they give you is a shiny 2021 penny. Most people would just drop it in their pocket or purse without a second glance. But you, because you watched this video, because you learned about 2021 error pennies, you hold onto that coin. And when you get home you examine it carefully, and you notice something odd about the date. It looks bolder than normal, slightly fuzzy, and you grab a magnifying glass and sure enough, you can see clear doubling, and you realize that this coin you just received is change. This coin that was literally handed to you a few hours ago might be worth $188 million, and your entire world has just transformed. Next, 2012 Lincoln penny. Today, we are diving deep into one of the most shocking and fascinating modern penny stories ever discussed. A story that proves once again that even a coin you might have spent without thinking could secretly be worth a life-changing fortune. Because in this video we are talking about the 2012 1-cent coin, a penny most people still consider modern, common, and boring. Yet under very specific circumstances, due to rare errors, minting mistakes, unusual production anomalies, and incredible what-if possibilities that collectors dream about, this single copper-plated zinc cent has been valued in legendary discussions at up to $12 million. And while that number represents an extreme top-tier theoretical or unique discovery scenario, understanding how such a value could even be imagined requires us to explore the fascinating world of mint errors, transitional planchets, die varieties, composition mistakes, and historical context surrounding the 2012 Lincoln cent. Because value in numismatics is not just about age, it is about rarity, condition, demand, story, and above all mistakes that were never supposed to happen. And to truly understand why a 2012 penny could be considered worth big money, we have to start by understanding what the 2012 1 cent was supposed to be in the first place. The United States Mint in 2012 was producing Lincoln cents primarily in copper-plated zinc, with a core of zinc making up 97.5% of the coin, and a thin copper plating of 2.5%, a composition that has been standard since 1982 after rising copper prices forced the mint to abandon the solid bronze alloy. And these 2012 pennies were struck at both the Philadelphia Mint, which does not use a mint mark, and the Denver Mint, which uses the D mint mark, with hundreds of millions produced, meaning that in normal circulated condition a typical 2012 cent is only worth 1 cent, maybe 2 or 3 cents if uncirculated. But the world of errors completely changes that reality, because errors are essentially accidents frozen in metal, and when those accidents are dramatic, rare, and visually obvious, collectors are willing to pay extraordinary sums to own them. And the first major category that fuels the idea of a $12,000,2012 penny is the possibility of a wrong planchet error, one of the most valuable and legendary error types in U.S. coinage. A wrong planchet error occurs when a coin is struck on a blank intended for a different denomination, different year, or even a different metal composition entirely. And while the mint has strict controls, history proves that mistakes still slip through, sometimes with staggering results. And for the 2012 cent, the most exciting theoretical scenario is a strike on a pre-1982 bronze planchet or an experimental or foreign planchet. Because a 2012 date struck on a solid bronze or copper planchet would be an impossible combination according to official mint records, making it instantly one of a kind or one of just a few known. And collectors place astronomical value on coins that should not exist, similar to how the 1943 bronze cent or the 1944 steel cent achieved legendary status and multi-million-dollar valuations. So imagine a verified 2012 penny struck on a 95% copper bronze planchet weighing around 3.11 grams instead of the standard 2.5 gram zinc core, authenticated by top grading services, proven genuine, and confirmed to have originated from a U.S. mint facility. Such a discovery would send shockwaves through the numismatic world, because it would suggest leftover bronze planchets were accidentally struck decades after they were officially discontinued. And while extremely unlikely, the very possibility keeps collectors searching, weighing their pennies, and dreaming. And this alone forms one of the biggest foundations behind the mythical $12 million valuation, because uniqueness combined with modern date shock creates intense demand. And beyond wrong planchets, another powerful value driver is the double die error, particularly double die obverse and double die reverse varieties, which occur when a die receives a misaligned or multiple impressions during the hubbing process, resulting in double design elements that are visible on the struck coin, such as doubling on the date, the word liberty, the motto "I in God we trust," or design elements on the reverse, like the Union Shield introduced in 2010, and while minor doubling is common and often worthless, dramatic, bold, and clearly separated doubling can command huge premiums. And if a 2012 penny were discovered with extreme, class-defining double dies unlike any previously known, especially if combined with pristine condition, it could reach staggering values, especially if only one or two examples exist, because rarity within a specific year is everything. And collectors love catalog varieties that become famous, and the more dramatic and visually striking the doubling, the more intense the competition among collectors. And in extreme cases where a double die is paired with another major error, values multiply exponentially rather than simply add. And speaking of combinations, multi-error coins are among the most valuable pieces in numismatics. And the idea of a 2012 cent featuring multiple errors such as a wrong planchet plus a double die, or a broad strike combined with an off-center strike and die rotation, pushes valuation into the realm of legendary conversation, because these are the coins that become museum pieces, the ones written about in books, auctioned at elite houses, and referenced for decades. And another category that fuels high valuation potential is off-metal errors involving foreign planchets, because U.S. mints sometimes produce coins for foreign countries. And in rare cases a foreign blank can be mistakenly fed into the coin press for U.S. coinage, resulting in a U.S. design struck on a foreign metal composition, weight, and diameter. And if a 2012 Lincoln cent were struck on a foreign planchet made of brass, aluminum, or another unusual alloy, especially one that does not match any U.S. coin specifications, it would become an instant rarity. And again, if only one known example exists, the value could skyrocket. And while $12 million represents an extreme upper narrative often used to illustrate just how valuable such a coin could theoretically be, it reflects the idea that collectors will pay extraordinary amounts for coins that rewrite what we thought was possible. And moving beyond planchets, another major error category that adds massive value potential is die errors, including die caps, cuds, retained cuds, and shattered dies. A cut occurs when a piece of the die breaks off, leaving a raised blob of metal on the coin where the design is missing. And while small cuds are relatively common, massive, dramatic cuds that obliterate large portions of the design are far rarer and more valuable. And if a 2012 penny were struck with a huge retained cud or a spectacular die break that covers significant design elements, especially if it happened early in the die's life and was preserved in high grade, collectors would pay thousands or tens of thousands, and when combined with other anomalies, potentially far more. And then there are off-center strikes, which occur when the planchet is not properly seated between the dies, resulting in a coin where part of the design is missing and blank metal is visible. And while off-center strikes are not rare in general, high percentage off-center strikes that still show the full date and mint mark are much more desirable, because the date is what ties the coin to its historical context, and a dramatic off-center. 2012 penny showing perhaps 50% or more off-center with a clear date could be worth hundreds or thousands depending on condition, but again, when layered with other errors, value increases significantly, and broad strikes are another category, where a coin is struck without the retaining collar, causing it to spread outward and appear larger and thinner than normal, and while minor broad strikes are common, extreme broad strikes with distorted lettering and full design can command strong premiums, especially in pristine condition, and rotational errors are also fascinating, where the obverse and reverse are not aligned correctly, sometimes rotated by 90 degrees, 180 degrees, or other angles, and while rotation alone may not reach extreme values, when combined with other errors it adds to the uniqueness of the piece. And another highly sought-after error is the missing clad layer or missing plating error, particularly relevant for modern zinc cents, because the copper plating is extremely thin, and errors during the plating process can result in partial or complete absence of the copper layer, revealing the raw zinc underneath, and these coins often appear silvery or dull gray, and while many are damaged after leaving the mint, true mint errors where the plating was never applied are collectible and valuable, and a fully unplated 2012 zinc cent in high grade could be worth hundreds or more. And again, when paired with other errors, the story becomes even more compelling, and we must also talk about transitional errors and experimental planchets, because while officially the cent composition did not change in 2012, the mint has historically tested alternative metals and processes, and any accidental release of a test planchet struck with a standard design would be one of the most valuable discoveries imaginable, because it represents a piece of secret mint history that was never meant to leave the facility, and collectors pay enormous sums for coins that reveal behind-the-scenes experimentation. And another important factor in the $12 million narrative is condition. Because condition multiplies value dramatically, a coin with a rare error in poor condition might be worth thousands, but the same coin in pristine mint state with original luster, sharp details, and minimal contact marks can be worth many times more. And for modern coins, like the 2012 cent, high grades such as MS68, MS69, or even theoretical MS70 are extremely rare. For error coins, because errors often disrupt the striking process, making perfect preservation difficult, and when a coin defies those odds, collectors take notice. And then there is the human psychology of collecting, which cannot be ignored, because value is not just about metal and rarity, it is about desire, competition, and story, and a modern penny valued at millions captures the imagination of the public, drawing in new collectors, media attention, and intense bidding wars. And this phenomenon has been seen before with coins like the 2000p Sacagawea dollar mule with a Washington quarter obverse, which sold for huge sums due to its shocking nature, and if a similarly shocking mule error involving a 2012 cent were discovered, such as a Lincoln cent obverse paired with the reverse of another denomination or design, the numismatic world would erupt. Because mules represent some of the rarest and most fascinating mint errors ever produced, and even a single verified example can command millions, and the $12 million figure reflects that extreme end of possibility rather than average reality, but it exists to illustrate how powerful these factors can be when they align. And another angle to consider is historical timing, because the 2012 cent exists in an era where most people assume minting technology is nearly flawless, so when an error slips through, it feels more extraordinary than similar mistakes in earlier eras, and collectors value that contradiction, the idea that even in a highly automated, controlled system, human and mechanical errors still occur. And then there is the role of third-party grading and authentication, because for any 2012 penny to reach extraordinary value, it must be certified by respected services like PCGS or NGC, with clear attribution of the error type, weight, composition, and origin. Because without authentication, even the most spectacular coin remains just a curiosity, but once certified, it becomes a documented artifact, tradable, insurable, and eligible for high-profile auctions. And auctions themselves play a massive role in value discovery, because when two or more wealthy collectors want the same unique piece, prices can soar far beyond initial estimates, and this is how coins move from thousands to millions, not because of intrinsic metal value, but because of competition and prestige. And speaking of prestige, owning a one-of-a-kind modern penny era is not just about investment. It is about status within the collecting community, and that intangible value drives bids higher and higher. And now we must talk about the everyday reality for viewers watching this video. Because while the idea of a $12,002,012 penny is exciting, it is important to understand that most 2012 cents are common, and only a tiny fraction will ever exhibit errors worth serious money. But that does not mean searching is pointless, because many valuable errors have been found by ordinary people checking pocket change, bank rolls, and coin jars, and the key is knowledge, knowing what to look for, weighing coins to detect wrong planchets, using magnification to spot doubling, examining edges and surfaces for unusual features, and understanding the difference between true mint errors and post-mint damage, because damage does not create value, but genuine mint mistakes do. And the 2012 cent is still recent enough that unsearched examples remain out there, sitting in collections, drawers, and jars, waiting for someone to notice something unusual, and that possibility keeps the hobby alive and thrilling. And another layer to the $12 million discussion is speculative storytelling, often used in viral coin content, because big numbers capture attention and inspire curiosity. But behind the headline is a deeper lesson about how coin values are determined, and why some mistakes become legendary, while others remain minor curiosities. And understanding that process makes you a smarter collector and a more informed viewer. And when you hear that a 2012 penny could be worth millions, it is not a promise, it is an invitation to learn, to search, and to appreciate the incredible complexity of modern coinage. And ultimately, the story of the 2012 1 cent valued at $12 million is a story about possibility, about the idea that even the most ordinary object can become extraordinary under the right circumstances, and that is why people collect coins, not just for money, but for the thrill of discovery, the connection to history, and the joy of holding something unique. And as you finish watching this video, remember to check your change carefully, because while the odds are small, they are never zero, and somewhere out there, a rare error coin may still be waiting to be found. And if you enjoy learning about hidden treasures like this, make sure you stay connected with the Coins Explorer, where we turn everyday coins into extraordinary stories, and keep exploring, because the next incredible discovery could be in your pocket right now. Next, 1979 Lincoln Penny. The place where everyday pocket change turns into unbelievable treasure stories, and where a simple 1-cent coin can rewrite everything you thought you knew about money, value, and hidden history. And today we are diving deep into one of the most shocking, controversial, and imagination-stretching stories in modern numismatics, the legendary 1979 Lincoln 1 cent that has stunned collectors with whispers, rumors, and documented possibilities suggesting values reaching an almost impossible $53 million, a number so large that it sounds like fiction, until you understand how errors, mistakes, mint anomalies, and historical circumstances can transform a copper coin meant to buy nothing into a once-in-a-generation artifact. Because the 1979 penny was struck at a critical time in United States mint history, when cost-cutting measures, metal composition experiments, high production demands, aging equipment, and human oversight collided, creating a perfect storm for some of the most dramatic mint errors ever theorized, discovered, and still hunted today. And to truly appreciate why a 1979 1 cent could even be discussed in the same sentence as multi-million-dollar rarities, you need to understand that pennies are not all created equal, because value in numismatics is born where intention fails and mistakes slip through unnoticed. And in 1979, the mint was producing billions of cents using copper-plated zinc planchets that had only recently replaced solid copper, a change that alone introduced countless risks such as improper plating thickness, exposed zinc cores, bonding failures, and foreign material contamination. And when you combine that with the massive output at Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, worn dies that were pushed far beyond their ideal lifespan, and quality control systems that could never realistically inspect every coin, you open the door to extraordinary errors that could exist undetected for decades. And one of the most dramatic possibilities tied to the mythical $53 million valuation is the existence of a 1979 cent struck on an entirely wrong planchet, such as a bronze planchet intended for an earlier year, a foreign coin blank, or even a test alloy never meant for circulation, because wrong planchet errors are among the most valuable in the world, especially when they involve transitional metals. And if a 1979 cent were discovered struck on a pre-1982 solid copper planchet weighing the correct mass but exhibiting unique metallurgical signatures inconsistent with any known issue, that alone could place it among the most important error coins ever found, especially if accompanied by mint documentation or provenance linking it to experimental runs. And then there is the mind-bending possibility of a 1979 cent struck on a planchet intended for a completely different denomination such as a dime, quarter, or even a foreign coin, because such off-metal strikes do exist, and when authenticated they command astronomical prices due to their rarity. And in some speculative, but technically possible scenarios, a cent struck on a silver or gold alloy test planchet would instantly transcend ordinary numismatic categories and become a museum-grade artifact worth millions on its own. And beyond planchet errors, die errors are where the 1979 penny truly begins to enter legend territory, because doubled dies, especially strong doubled dies visible without magnification, have historically produced some of the most valuable coins ever sold. And if a 1979 double die obverse or reverse existed with dramatic, unmistakable doubling on Lincoln's profile, the date, Liberty, or I in God We Trust, combined with an extremely low survival rate or even a single known specimen, collectors would compete fiercely, pushing prices into territory usually reserved for ultra-rare colonial coins or unique gold patterns. And die doubling is only the beginning, because hub doubling, die shifts, misaligned hubs, and multiple impressions can produce layered images that look almost surreal. And if a 1979 cent displayed multiple stages of hubbing with offset impressions creating a ghost-like secondary Lincoln portrait or duplicated lettering so extreme it challenged belief, such a coin would instantly become a numismatic sensation. And then there are die breaks, cuds, and retained cuds, which occur when sections of the die crack or break away entirely, leaving raised blobs or missing details on the struck coin. And while minor cuds are common, massive retained cuds spanning large portions of the coin, especially if they intersect critical design elements like Lincoln's face or the date, are exceptionally rare. And a 1979 cent featuring a catastrophic die failure frozen in time on a single strike could be considered a one-of-a-kind piece. And when uniqueness enters the equation, price ceilings disappear, because collectors are no longer buying a coin, they are buying exclusivity, history, and the right to own something no one else can ever have. And striking errors further deepen the mystery, because off-center strikes, broad strikes, and multiple strikes can create coins that look like abstract art. And while many off-center cents are relatively affordable, extreme off-center strikes that still show the full date and mint mark are exponentially rarer. And if a 1979 cent were struck dramatically off-center multiple times with clear overlapping impressions, creating a layered image of Lincoln repeated around the flan, such a piece would be virtually priceless to error specialists, especially if combined with other anomalies like wrong metal or die doubling, and one of the most fascinating and speculative possibilities tied to the $53 million valuation involves transitional errors related to metal composition, because while the major transition to zinc occurred in 1982, the late 1970s were already a period of experimentation and logistical complexity, and if a 1979 set were discovered with an anomalous composition, such as a copper-rich alloy inconsistent with known standards or containing trace elements indicating a test batch, that coin would attract not only collectors but metallurgists, historians, and institutions, and scientific analysis using X-ray fluorescence could reveal secrets hidden for decades, transforming a small brown coin into a groundbreaking discovery. And surface errors also play a role, because lamination errors, where layers of metal peel or split due to impurities or bonding failures, can be visually dramatic, and while small laminations are not extremely valuable, large, intact laminations that reveal the internal structure of the coin are far rarer, and a 1979 set with a massive, stable lamination exposing zinc beneath copper plating, especially if aesthetically striking and well preserved, could command extraordinary premiums. And even more extreme are split planchet errors, where the coin separates into two thin layers, each bearing partial designs, and such errors are already scarce, but a perfectly preserved 1979 split planchet set with clear details on both halves would be a numismatic marvel. And then there is the mysterious realm of Mule errors, where obverse and reverse dies from different coins are mistakenly paired, and while no confirmed 1979 set mule of legendary status has surfaced publicly, the theoretical existence of a Lincoln set obverse paired with an incorrect reverse, such as a dime, foreign coin, or even a metal die, would instantly rewrite error coin history, because mules are among the rarest and most coveted errors in existence. And if such a coin were authenticated, especially from a year like 1979 when documentation is sparse and production was immense, bidding wars would erupt across the globe, and the valuation could easily reach into the tens of millions. Especially if the coin were unique, and mint marks also add another layer, because the presence or absence of a mint mark can dramatically affect value, and a 1979 set with an anomalous mint mark, such as a repunched mint mark, doubled mint mark, or even a mint mark from the wrong mint, would be highly desirable. And while mint marks were not punched by hand in 1979 as they were in earlier decades, anomalies related to mint mark placement or style could still occur through die modifications or experimental dies. And then there is the concept of struck-through errors, where foreign material, such as grease, cloth, wire, or metal fragments are caught between the die and planchet during striking, leaving dramatic impressions. And while many struck-through errors are subtle, large and clearly defined struck-through objects that create unique textures or voids can be astonishing. And a 1979 set struck through an identifiable object that left a permanent imprint could be considered a miniature time capsule from the mint floor. And when combined with other errors, value compounds exponentially, and condition cannot be ignored, because preservation plays a massive role in valuation, and most error coins survive in circulated condition. But an uncirculated or near-perfect example retains every detail of the error as it occurred, and a pristine 1979 error set graded at the highest levels by a major grading service would be exponentially more valuable than a worn counterpart, and grading itself becomes part of the story, because third-party authentication provides legitimacy, and when a coin is encapsulated, described, and certified as unique or one of a handful known, confidence skyrockets among buyers, and provenance is equally important, because a documented history tracing a coin back to original discovery, especially if found in an old collection mint, employee estate, or sealed mint bag, adds credibility and romance, and stories matter in numismatics, because collectors are storytellers at heart, and a 1979 set discovered in a forgotten roll, an inherited jar, or a bank box untouched for decades captures the imagination in ways no ordinary object can. And the $53 million figure attached to this coin is not simply about metal and errors. It represents the theoretical ceiling when multiple ultra-rare factors converge into a single specimen, because when uniqueness, historical significance, extreme error classification, perfect condition, and ironclad authentication align, traditional price guides become meaningless, and auctions become battlegrounds of prestige rather than practicality. And while skeptics may question such valuations, history has repeatedly shown that the numismatic market can defy expectations, with coins once dismissed as curiosities later selling for record-breaking sums, and the ongoing search for extraordinary 1979 cents continues because billions were struck, meaning statistically there could still be undiscovered anomalies waiting in collections, jars, rolls, and forgotten drawers. And this is what fuels the excitement, because unlike ancient gold coins locked away in museums, Lincoln cents remain accessible, democratic, and tantalizingly close to everyday life. And every time you pick up a penny, you hold not just a cent, but the possibility of a mistake that slipped through the cracks, survived circulation, and waited patiently to be recognized, and the idea that a 1979 1 cent could be worth $53 million is not about guaranteeing riches, but about understanding that value is born from rarity, curiosity, and human error. And in the world of numismatics, the smallest oversight can create the greatest treasure. And as collectors continue to examine, weigh, measure, and analyze their coins with greater knowledge and better tools, the story of the 1979 penny remains open, unfinished, and full of potential, reminding us that history is not always written in books or monuments, but sometimes hidden in plain sight, quietly resting in the palm of your hand, waiting for someone curious enough to look closer. And that is why the hunt never ends here at the Coins Explorer, where every coin has a story, and even a single cent can change everything. Last 1982 Lincoln Penny. Everyday pocket change turns into extraordinary stories of hidden fortune, and today we are diving into one of the most fascinating and misunderstood coins in modern American numismatics, a coin that many people still overlook, spend, or ignore without realizing that in extremely rare cases it has been linked to values soaring as high as $15 million. Yes, you heard that right. $15 million for a single 1 cent coin. And we are talking about the legendary 1982 Lincoln 1 cent, a year that quietly became one of the most important transition points in United States mint history, and a year filled with errors, mistakes, anomalies, and minting oddities that have turned ordinary-looking pennies into once-in-a-lifetime treasures. And as you sit back and listen to this story, remember that these coins were not produced centuries ago or locked away in museums. They were struck in massive numbers, released into circulation, spent on candy, parking meters, and grocery purchases, and many of them still sit today in jars, drawers, rolls, and collections, waiting for someone knowledgeable enough to recognize what makes them special. Because 1982 was not just another year for the Lincoln cent, it was the year the U.S. Mint fundamentally changed how pennies were made, shifting from the traditional copper alloy composition that had been used for decades to a new zinc-based core plated with copper. And this transition did not happen cleanly or instantly. Instead, it created a chaotic overlap of different compositions, weights, dyes, and production practices, resulting in one of the most error-prone and variety-rich years ever seen for the 1 cent coin. And this chaos is exactly what opened the door to ultra-rare mistakes that could elevate a humble penny into the realm of multi-million-dollar collectibles. Because in 1982 the mint struck pennies in both 95% copper and the new copper-plated zinc format. And not only that, but they also used both large date and small date designs, meaning that collectors today recognize at least 7 major varieties for the year when you factor in Philadelphia and Denver issues. And this complexity alone makes 1982 a magnet for discovery. But what truly pushes certain examples into astronomical value territory are the extreme errors and transitional anomalies that should never have happened. Starting with the most famous and valuable category, the wrong planchet errors, where a coin is struck on a blank intended for a completely different denomination or composition, and in the case of 1982, some of the most sensational examples involve pennies struck on bronze planchets after the mint was supposed to have switched to zinc, or even more astonishing, pennies struck on planchets intended for foreign coins or experimental alloy tests, and when a genuine, authenticated example surfaces that can be conclusively tied to a transitional or experimental planchet from this critical year. Collectors and institutions compete fiercely because these pieces represent physical evidence of a moment when U.S. coinage history was literally changing under pressure from rising copper prices. And this is where the idea of a $15 million valuation comes into play, because at the very top end of the market, unique or near-unique transitional errors from pivotal years can command staggering prices when two conditions are met: extreme rarity and undeniable historical importance, and the 1982 set checks both boxes when the right error is present, particularly when we talk about off-metal strikes where a 1982 Lincoln cent is struck on a 95% copper planchet that was never intended to be used after the official changeover, or on a planchet that is significantly overweight or underweight compared to known standards. Because weight is one of the most critical diagnostic tools for identifying valuable 1982 pennies, with copper cents weighing approximately 3.11 grams and zinc cents weighing around 2.5 grams, and even a slight deviation from these weights can signal something extraordinary. But beyond weight, there are visual and structural clues as well, such as edge coloration, sound when dropped, strike sharpness, and die alignment. And when multiple anomalies converge on a single coin, the value multiplier increases exponentially. And then there are the double die errors, another category that fuels the legend of the 1982 penny, where elements of the design appear doubled due to misalignment during the die creation process. And while minor doubling is relatively common and often mistaken for damage, true doubled dies show strong, rounded, separated images on letters, numbers, and Lincoln's features, and a dramatic double die obverse or reverse on a rare 1982 variety, especially a copper small date, can elevate a coin into the elite tier of collectible errors. Because collectors are not just buying a mistake, they are buying a documented failure in the minting process that produced a visually striking and instantly recognizable anomaly. And when such a coin is also preserved in high mint state condition, free of wear, corrosion, or cleaning, its value can skyrocket far beyond what most people imagine possible for a modern cent. And condition is absolutely critical here, because a $15 million coin is not a circulated curiosity pulled from a parking lot. It is an exceptional specimen that has somehow survived decades with razor-sharp details, full luster, and pristine surfaces, which adds another layer of improbability and allure, making the discovery story even more compelling. Because imagine the odds of a rare transitional error being struck, escaping detection, entering circulation or storage, and then remaining untouched for years until rediscovered by someone who understands exactly what to look for. And speaking of discovery, one of the most exciting aspects of the 1982 penny story is that new finds are still possible, because unlike ancient coins or limited commemoratives, these cents were produced by the hundreds of millions. And while only a microscopic fraction contain life-changing errors, the sheer volume ensures that undiscovered examples could still exist, especially in old rolls from banks, estate collections, or long-forgotten hoards. And this fuels the dream that drives collectors to examine every 1982 penny they come across, weighing them, inspecting dates, studying the shape of the numerals to determine large date versus small date, checking mint marks, and listening closely for the telltale ring that distinguishes copper from zinc. And then there are the missing mint mark errors, which add another layer of intrigue, particularly with Denver issues, because while Philadelphia cents traditionally lack a mint mark, Denver cents are supposed to carry the D, and when that D is missing due to a filled die or grease strike, it creates a dramatic anomaly that collectors love, especially when combined with other errors such as off-center strikes, broad strikes, or die clashes where design elements from one side of the coin appear ghosted on the other. And while many missing mint marks are relatively minor, a truly dramatic and well-documented example from 1982 on the correct rare composition can significantly increase value. And then, there are the extreme strike errors, such as off-center strikes where the design is dramatically shifted, leaving a blank crescent of planchet visible, or double strikes where the coin was struck twice with misalignment, creating a distorted, layered appearance. And while these errors occur across many years, their value is amplified when they appear on already desirable base varieties like the 1982 copper small date, because collectors prize coins that combine multiple layers of rarity. And it is this stacking of rarity factors that can push theoretical valuations into the multi-million-dollar realm, especially when uniqueness or near uniqueness can be demonstrated through population reports and expert analysis. And authentication is absolutely non-negotiable in this world, because with values this high, the market is flooded with altered coins, plated pieces, misattributed weights, and outright counterfeits, which is why any 1982 pennies suspected of being extraordinary must be evaluated by top-tier grading services using advanced metallurgical testing, microscopic examination, and comparison to known genuine examples. And when a coin passes these tests and is encapsulated with an attribution that confirms an unprecedented or extremely rare error, its status changes overnight from curiosity to historic artifact, and at that point, the value is no longer determined by price guides or typical auction results, but by private negotiations, institutional interest, and the willingness of elite collectors to pay for exclusivity, because at the top of the market, a coin is not just metal, it is a story, a moment frozen in time, a tangible link to a pivotal shift in American coinage policy driven by economics, technology, and human error. And the 1982 penny embodies all of that in a way few modern coins can, because it represents the end of the traditional copper cent era and the beginning of a new chapter, and errors from such transition years have always commanded premiums. From the famous 1943 copper cent to various transitional nickels, dimes, and quarters, and the reason collectors are willing to pay staggering sums for these coins is that they are unlikely to ever be repeated, because the circumstances that created them were unique to that moment, and once the mint corrected its processes and completed the transition, the window closed forever, locking those errors into history. And this is why stories of a $15 million 1982 penny continue to circulate, not as guarantees or everyday occurrences, but as the extreme upper boundary of what is theoretically possible when all rarity factors align perfectly. And while most 1982 pennies are worth only face value or a modest premium, the possibility that one could be worth a fortune is very real, grounded in documented errors, auction history, and the established behavior of the numismatic market, and that possibility is what keeps collectors searching, learning, and sharing knowledge, because every major discovery begins with curiosity and attention to detail. And as you finish listening to this exploration of the 1982 1 cent, remember that the next time you see a penny dated 1982, you are holding a coin from one of the most complex and error-rich years in U.S. mint history, a coin that might look ordinary at first glance but could, under the right circumstances, be extraordinary beyond imagination. And that is exactly why we explore coins the way we do here on the Coins Explorer, because history, value, and mystery often hide in the smallest places, sometimes right in the palm of your hand.